Everybody got that? MBA can plan the United States federal government system seeking physical distribution, United States federal federal jobs, guaranteed to one, and second of percent, and after recession produce rapid level employment by shooting private workers on labor force that guaranteed so long so go through second stagnation, up to 22. Federal research has seen even after unemployment rates fall forward labor participation advance more people who from permanently from labor markets workers have not seen wage increase which is some of the decline in participation structures and cannot explain why participation countries with higher participation have more closely regulated markets and markets are voluntarily leaving labor supply conditions explain very little. Critically, if it's a merit produces insufficient jobs wage growth lower encourages workers to voluntarily it keeps wage growth lower and encourages voluntary workers to leave and go giving constrained jobs and wages stagnation that will add to the pandemic is that rates have fallen nearly and once they're currently in job getting rents finally in them in the fall. Tertiary 18, the economy enters recession on average 77 years with the JT and places workers in transition without the JT. They face uncertain progress. The program is mechanical legal rubber providing needs stabilization, not use the unemployed to stabilize reduces cost of unemployment and we job creation wage stagnation ensure that all economic growth is a temporary as a bubble. Only job creating is often growth for future crises while checking enough productivity to overcome secular stagnation. Rate all 18 Americans are leaving the labor force with weak job creation, short living expansion, provided by unstable bubbles. Once bubbles burst, we return to secular stagnation. Efficient accurate man has created a discouraged work effect. The U.S. operating with substantial labor slack that reduces the incentive to innovate. A vicious cycle disincentivized is to keep growth lower to increase accurate man and productivity growth. And secular economic stagnation is a crisis seller makes nuclear war prolific. U.S. China war and every other great power conflict more likely. Oppenheimer 21. Stagnation increases the likelihood to deliver globalization, multipolarity, nationalism, divide and future list. Ensure that the next exercise will be dancing on the government church court radically forces produce to reduce geopolitical conflict, lead to war, lead to law, or government jobless, waste stagnation, issue of preventing stress will continue lead of nuclear weapons or collapse, arms control, MBTN, accelerating arms race, are all goes badly, and global wars and existentialism that will unless the U.S. avoids relative economic decline. House 20 isolation is not an option. There's a real danger of opportunities to go back to wars being integrated massive base, emerging global challenges like health, climate, terrorism, Iran, Korea, China, and a job guarantee stabilizes fleeting state revenues without triggering inflation. Fallout 18. The JT will increase employment and the result in resources. Stabilization. JT would function as automatic robust stabilizer, maintaining employment, zeroing down for and that ensures state governance failure since their funding is inherently constrained. But the plan solves through using unlimited federal funds. Carpenter 20. Federal, state, and local services infrastructure at the lowest workforce levels in half a century. Job guarantee would increase bargaining power. Yes, states have a weak capacity to respond to economic crises. States have nothing like a federal reserve to back their debt, and that stalls state governance, which is key to innovative emerging tech regulation. Bendar 22. States play a crucial role. States can be centers of policy innovation. States tend to be better at big goal to support major policy actions. States have been stalling drivers of progress and change. The federal system was enough flexibility to innovate policy innovations, including AI, biomass, and blockchain energy that are becoming more difficult to achieve at a federal level. States without states in energy, trade and technology, have standards in foreign policy. States they can lead in supply chain resilience, perceptive viability, and the strength of the U.S. in the world order. Extinction, best 414, emerging sectors, survival, unrest, and global risk. Biotechnology, disease, geoengineering, we need to manage them globally, develop adaptive institution. We can survive nuclear war, new technologies pose greater risk for humanity. And advantage 2 is working the first in areas agriculture jobs. The plan provides global recycling programs, also regenerative industrial agriculture, water pollution from agricultural runoff, and sustainable ocean farming. Section 22, recycling programs can save the ocean, low passing shopping. JG can implement sustainable fishing, ocean farming, repair, construction communities, coastal communities, under massive employment, big agriculture, led to abuse of practices, states, and has produced water crisis, soil erosion, antibiotic resistance. Sustainable agriculture is critical for the last regenerative farming. The JG can multiply CSAs by focusing on sustainable agriculture and improving U.S. oil supercharges agriculture productivity, logs and global food security. Purpose of class will look like for 21. Degraded soils reduce our rates by 40% in the Midwest of 100 years now. About that degraded soils at 60% lowering our horniness and global food security. And food insecurity goes nuclear. Equip 22. Hunger struggles and government failure, civil wars and refugees and armies in the world are at high risk of food failure and conflict of the future raging from rising nuclear war and nutrient pollution. Nested access essential amid a collapse of the ocean, outweighs climate change. You don't respond on reduction, buys enough time to confront extinction. Correct 92. There are boundaries far more worries of climate change, nutrient pollution, and marine problem for off carries excess fertilizer, nutrients, and induce large blooms as balloons are the number of deaths as double. Reducing stress is getting global. The chances in entire planet diversity causes deaths of reducing marine nutrient pollution in the U.S. by humanity enough time to figure out solutions. And scenario 2 is unions. Biden will undoubtedly push democratic norms globally while weak domestic unions and assure authoritarianism prevails. There are 23 to provide priorities of illustrated shifts in U.S. thinking and focus on organized labor, democracy, state unions are essential to democracy. We need strong labor movements. Biden doesn't self for a union. How to rhetoric translates into meaningful action is more complicated. Biden embarked on a modest state of efforts. No union's capacity plus political change power outweighs smaller and organization studies. Pointed democratic decline in the West is supported for the U.S. to use a lot of economic power to support workers. And the plan's vital to resurrect unions and power the working class. Costello 19 of a GG means a traditional working program combined with the chemicals like a solution that's work for comparison makes little sense. Workers would be able to strike the workers. Is that what JG would make mass unionization a possibility? A weak union movement is unclear how earners would have social leverage and only dropping the attacks at economic beliefs at the root and inequality, building social solidarity is key. Hook 17 of a JG can transform the social safety and social solidarity, inequality, stagnant waste, and diminish labor force. force participation, inequality and stagnant wages and diminished labor force participation is destabilizing and popular emergence that allows American society only bearing unions in the working class and island escalation. Church 23, popular emergence when economy of forces of broad swaths of climate, capital, quadruple other relative ways economy, emergence, social sacrifice, popular violence of America's current economy, American value, revolution, and U.S. breakdown goes global nuclear causation. Limit 17 is the one in America, China, Russia, Korea, Iran is wherever war doesn't end, their power war with nuclear powers will fall. Scenario 3 is the CDC. We are in the phase of an incoming syndemic virus consisting of new viruses and variants. The risk is higher. Evidence uses the best analysis. Operator 23. The U.S. is sitting in the face of a syndemic virus. U.S. rates of hospitalizations from the RSV and the flu are also on the rise. U.S. is surged by clopidogrel pneumonia and the recent UK case of the strain of the swine flu was new to humans. As was eyeing with variant BA26 surpassed very anticipated good and anticipated winter surge levels doubling each week for the past 4 weeks. And in the face of such crisis, the CDC shutting jobs but federally directed job security solves garbage ready. The CDC has been shutting jobs. The federal government structure and fund structure the public service program to boost and supply of physicians capacity, state agencies, and local governance a weakening. Critics were the lack of personnel and decision making agencies reliance on lobbyists to ensure a more resilient and secure public infrastructure. Americans can transform our country into 190 for the next pandemic. And the CDC managed jobs guarantees programs as a linchpin of an effective national response. Smart to do is running competency for workers and consciences will take people in the battle this morning. Many reasons many pandemics as are understaffed health care needs of the recruiters are two unrelated problems. People are out of a job. The government needs to expand its workforce. Solution 300,000 full-time contract takers managed by the CDC to be recruited, trained, and hired. The national-wide program could coordinate priorities, establish standardized protocols, and reach the CDC has the internal knowledge and capacity to run something like this contract. The CDC job to train for rather than any degree or workers from a wide range of background could participate in this. That is fellow dramatically a job guarantee would make us more vulnerable for the next crisis for public health. Of course, may be redirected everything from infectious disease to cancer, choices, math, federal public health corps, and unmitigated pandemics causing station. Demand is 22. Even worse, how to face the next pandemic. Even worse, pandemics doesn't exist for the human race. It could result in complete shutdown of civilization and new variants with a mutation could be by weakening antibodies. COVID helped us realize that we may be sitting on a time bomb where billions of other viruses are breeding, putting into danger the existence of other inhabitants of planet Earth. And independently, CDC's having shortages for private sector, Browser 23, private sector biotech innovation, Browser 23, the CDC will be woefully unable to prepare for the next battery. It's not a question of when such illness occurs, simply when. Cutting the CDC's estimation weakens private sector's willingness to invest will result in the elimination of research projects that means precedent for new research desire. At a time when biotechnology and big pharma is being down and decreased federal funding is a formula for scientific progression, and biotech decline allows the Chinese sector to overtake American pharma. Extinction more 20. No-go experts, no-go Russia experts awarded a time to more exotic catastrophe in a previous age. Nuclear weapons today is about biotechnology, and China will new China's guiding up. China's competing with the U.S. regions by national science. The U.S. China's going to link pharmaceutical out to disrupt the battlefield medicine, alter them or harm U.S. forces in biotechnology. They're straightforward terrorists to develop weapons. No one allowed would have any resistance to these standards in China. Matter if the weapon is unleashed, it's like any other country could escape.
How does the app solve these inevitable recessions?
Right. So we have made the argument. So inevitable recessions always occur, Dante's 22, but we need to stop these recessions from spilling over. That's the Oppenheimer 20 evidence.
Yeah, I'm asking how you stop them. How do
Right.
you solve them?
So it's about creating it's about creating jobs for people to fall back upon. It means that when they are unemployed, the Rebuttals 18 evidence and the tertiary 18 evidence says that right now workers aren't employed and they aren't working, but if we give them that safety net during recessions where they can fall back up on and go back to the private sector, that solves for unemployment, which we've identified as the root cause of it.
How much is the wage?
Normal means is 15.
Okay, is that indexed to inflation?
No.
Alright, so how does a $15 wage overcome wage stagnation across the entire economy?
Could you explain the question?
I have something. When I see Geneva 18 specifically says that the minimum wage would be good enough to overcome temporary asset bubbles in all sectors.
The Dante's card is about wage stagnation.
He said the tertiary.
Yeah.
I also can expand on that. Like I said earlier, it's not about the wages and how much it gives them money. It's about just giving them enough support to go back to the private sector.
Yeah, not about the wage. Alright. Oppenheimer says secular stagnation has been happening since 2007. What's the break?
Right. The Oppenheimer evidence says that stagnation increases as more things in our like daily basis are increasing. There's more globalization, there's more multipolarity, things like that, nationalism, all increase the economic tension and cause a break.
Yeah, okay. Oppenheimer says, quote, the next recession will be particularly nasty. Is that when your impact happens?
Well, we make a claim that the economy keeps tensing up. Next recession is when they.
Next recession, okay. What's the internal link between increasing state tax revenue and effective governance of technology?
Right. So our evidence has identified that right now states just don't have the fiscal capacity to do anything. The job guarantee allows for that to happen. It puts money into the state's economy by doing a job guarantee. It's overall economically productive. It puts like civilians and people in states make more economic output. Means that they have more money to fund things like innovation, which is the term.
Okay, sure. The second advantage, how does inequality cause civil war?
Right, so we've identified it that inequality leads to popular immersation. Popular immersation is the internal link. It collapses American society. And that collapse in American society, that's the Church in 23 evidence, says that results in a civil war.
How does that get to the scale of like U.S. breaking down?
Right, I was just going into that. Right, I was going into that. The Lightman 17 evidence says that when the U.S. is at a civil war, other countries perceive it as weak. If it has internal conflicts, they know that they're susceptible to more violence.
Okay, I'm sending out the 1C. Order is 7, and then the advantages in the Alright, so is there a standard you have to do something like this? Okay. Where can I stand if it's my laptop?
We were saying earlier you can see.
Okay.
Or if you want to use the podium.
Okay, so what if I use
If his laptop unplugs, it turns off and deletes all the stuff. So you gotta keep using the code.
my phone's still there. Restart.
On my timer. I'm gone. I'm just downloading. Give me a second.
I'm
Give
good.
me a second. I'm good.
Yeah.
T tax and redistribution requires taxation spending complaints only transfer violates for no bill. To receive redistribution covering collects taxes and then expenditures in the rest of the variable and public goods like collecting taxes and making expenditures change primary distribution of income and tax or secondary distribution which accounts for my taxation spending code net limits and infinite amount of transfer only mechanisms to like net reserve burning ground taxes are controversy law change status quo by the Union ground states council. 50 states and Northern territories should establish an implementing a state agreement to abolish balance budget requirements for the reserve bank system, adopt the job guarantee, and a state agreement solved in a way that our jobs attached, align the salaries with the inequalities, where now we need infrastructure, there's levels for regulators need to counter rules in the market economy, like interstate arrangements and bring together communities on get deals with variations or multiple state or common vision of or and shared markets, interstate government rights, interstate structures, and procedures to the Tasha and during the first two, they start regulators or opportunities and or separate democratic legitimate good, adopt reform versus or two over the credit and reconciliate from others that are overseas and state ways, even such boards, governments, and Congress. Sabotage superior made certain than federal pathways to improve economic conditions. UGA gets raised to the bottom and the project runs for the efficiency towards economic scale, pulling a risk of downturn. Elections is set. Parliament's now position weak policies, thinks disadvantage in every 23 battle with Republican, that are reflecting the country on orders to base strong signs for MGB. I can use like 2024. Democrats, while it's unfortunately pulling between financial battle and its high advantage, they're all going to really to only giving a private value on his leader, Biden down the podium and Howard planning to fix the problem. I know experience number on the good Bruce and you get the hold there. Taking forward looking approach to around the White House is not the power. Change of opinion on specific issues that really can make the president a new deal. It's under illusion that will give its marginal voters, but they'll only find their approach to the economy are correct. We're going to account for it. So we can find specific increasing the importance of his worst issues. The bill is astonishing. The popular over 19 teams. The federal jobs committee raising concerns that voters seem where only 9% support people really crazy full job. Everyone gives the bottom of serving 14% of federal jobs committee go 39% when the federal order this is a great private sector job. Trump election calls this nuclear war. Here's 23.
Recent fear Trump's return to the White House, ignorance follow on, ignorance policy, American person would like to race the second time around, bro. That's what you're race by Russian Ukraine, trying North Korea, America needs to leader again. Thank God, meaningfully acknowledge the limitations of our plan to authorities in America, Trump, together with starting nuclear weapons, tech, really agree with what to say. Nuclear bolt from the blue, Trump will this is available to the person who agrees to involve the WMD, American Information America, person has some worldwide nuclear war. Expect the plan text should specify the federal branch securities, the plan data, and that's key Asian counterbalance, stable links to trade off and politics, as object to that, so see counter. United States government should implement employment and wage subsidy for private sector employment, initially gives the federal minimum wage, pass correcting the right to organize act, increase funding of federal agencies, especially those who are already staff and shortages, increase its direct hiring of federal agencies, employees, staff, executive agencies, the plan allows the economic analyze the private sector of the accountable sales case and avoids the least of 19. Even if the JG law works to be fires, there would need to pressure on the ministry to avoid firing, is also we need to talk about activity. People within work out to where there's solution of workplace. Here's toleration of disordered behavior, guarantee also analyze the fire sector, make the economy less fire JG. Will be the fire companies telling you when Ron was around drug jobs, their benefits, activism, all the right wage benefits, over still the other ability of heads, a reach for giving government jobs, and law of the private sector, more effective than better employees, building all skills, rates, so the minimum wages, and everything you have out, like corporate federal accountable. 50 states to condition cooperation with federal union on the United States federal government adopting a jobs guarantee. It solves and leads the federal government revitalizing and cooperate federalism in 13 states. Bill have laws saying intentional companies and writing against federal law, their jobs, the risk laws, and stop these funding. Federal laws successfully remedy the environment regulations, experience, federal time, regulation. First, we work with these companies that are federal law, but states, they also further express the enforcement of but not in the series of over that enforce laws on the third nationalization of law enforcement, hence counter. 12, security, federalism, relevant, diverse states, and federal counter, local law, flexibility, one side of the main allocation can be required, and facility needs are defined by demographics, so without federal nationalized account terrorism resulting less secure America, state law enforcement have this authority of best practice terror tubes, the globe virus 19. New terrorists working with nuclear war government starts some terror stronghold of the region, stabilize escalating nuclear war change direction, nuclear technology, show that involving every woman say it into the entire species. Terrorists are going to get this research into where they're playing hotspot automation decided. It's only now it comes from their absolute automation room in South Korea by one of the world's genius or the doctors play 10 words for every robot in America that gives 20.1 day 25 billion more spend out or robots with 7.1% global expenditure. Automation works the whole thing for a reason and coordination. They like catalyze mass innovation Lord 18. The minimum wage is utilizing distribution of workers whose jobs are easily automated, voice more report tech such as self-observed reactions and inevitably on workers with active principle and given in wage increase low skill automations and burning low skill jobs and wage increase changes in the ways for us. The low skilled workers are jobs which go to the process of responsibility and terms. Following wage increases which are on for the principle like do which means refer to automate responsibility and wage increase automation like goal likely that enables a terrible extinction. 14. AGI going to have to give humans and much operate AGI is 5 with respect to humanity. AGI is possible to eliminate jobs of human growth of a and AGI will more power even if AGI exponentially functions of the increasing number of decisions maybe AGI would become difficult to replace one of the member of AGI from their team. Even though only one difference to human bodies for AGI plus access to the right econ. Resilience. No recession now, but it's 22, there's not e-commerce faster than 70 months, yes, economic expanding, related trouble, yes, purchasing, help out, increasing new orders, driving, one point, increasing, over this, or raising, how the economy is performing, coming alongside rates like GDP, and force growth of the economy, trust track 2%, outside the labor, because there's more support, right, service also, the prices always fast growing, US economy continues to expand, line employees, the economy, 418, tissue, right out private sector, 70 less million, the JG salary, use something very one consider leading, the procedure, like you, how do you do efficiency, rather, for you, do after, by setting a wage, what we're investment, our resources, and laws, we're reducing, for the infrastructure costs, rather, when the results and response model of insurance with the real driver of the emergence not provide skills to improve stagnation, structural harness will pointed. GDP's letter appears to be doubling as many years 4%, so that's pretty easy to press, but this is something we can base voluntarily back to the real world diversity to grow the workers are changed. You are going to grow that job was even by expanding college and groups become the vision that there are still has consequences. Oppenheimer's running up workforce, not just stagnation, says not by a lot of us. I'll insert the one you see Oppenheimer. Emerging tech. No emerging tech impact right away in the high stage 19 history council of women's tech. Not only were promised how economic building effects this temporary consequence to reshape conflict innovation agreement and middle some disagree with our tech the executive to executive effects today's tech and some conditions stabilizing how factors may negative effects of GRE material power domestic politics solvency JG fails administration failure exacerbate core power and stigma 617. Credit has been for all employees just replace existing one. How we can micromanage employees for two events and figure out this strong and catch up with governments with money off the euro. This benefit of regular voice through regular monitoring of the government recommendation behind the carrier dogs. Effect 2 and 2 primary words. One result in the large escalation behind either its problems areas of currency or one. Signal better than having a job should lose the already open with. I'll make the problem worse. Workers finish. Blank can't solve infrastructure jobs where a great deal of skill and performance to solve the jobs guarantee can make employ people experts and never going to be worse delayed. Disjunction between research and research policy favors academic direction, research for study, research awards, and efficient and costly way to compensate the resource of which choice and argue percent of companies where everyone consumer rights and knowledge scale. New debts and the impact on cost for 15 is when you see all of the US are caused by humans. Next to the other machine legal litigation and sort of tech based situation with a major limitation complex remains and those cannot be associated. Unions are high, goal 21. And then we have COVID unions that over and reduction of benefits that started double chance and started out new force most unions start on results again. employees are going to mold less scoring on broadly subversive central works political work companies are finding employees with possible employees can make made on workers reading their values or their workers are getting units on the work employee with not more better chance of like Washington on the sun economic work companies that are on the side but union will work out on section more data doing more movement than ever. Didn't walk yourself, they didn't read the terminal impact. I'll answer when they read the terminal impact. CC. The next some cause extinction for 20 highest fatalities bowl, including whether it's fatalities seen outside Africa and likely death of 90% resulting extinction. War seems unlikely considering pathogen and bare war like causation would happen. How long term incubation time, such a person can affect us around where we the interest of the original wage and agents, pathogen that cause 90% fatalities to get quarantined. The biotech impact is about China using it to win a war, but there won't be China wars in the first place. 22. Restraints for almost 70 years, they've remained China public access to be not leader boards, diplomacy, or some sufficient leaders on government communicate out of network of institutions have AI stake against every government for the conflict of mediation. Okay. And civil war is funny, but no, there's the data, 1122. Civil wars are flawed, violence, extraordinary, unlikely. Data comes from low audience numbers, dubious cities, these are breaking search in America. The backslide is exactly research civil war, they compare no more than 1,000 violent wars, not economic violence. Avoid violence, everyone removes the violence direction. Few things are hard than inserting against the state, FBI disrupts the dishes, and all this kind of stuff. Makes globalization makes war, and when all politicians can now go over ability to worry the press, everyone watching going to the violence state, this endurance, it's all second trade balance, terror, China, and US law combination. Okay, I guess we're using democracy. Democratic peace theory, sharing, dialogue between democracy, event, much be 90 world, so hundreds of studies, and whatever these we got going relation, dialogue, and it's the line of those 8,000 arguments in democracy, trying to see it different. Democracy codes on the bottom.
Okay, no, it's fine.
Yeah, you're right.
One more time. Oh, it's-
I'm not really in the party game.
I don't know.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure. Cool.
He
Ready
said
for
something.
it, so. Oh wait, it's at the bottom. Okay.
Yes.
Then it's fine.
He just said something.
Alright,
Let me just use it. Right, I got it.
Okay, results.
Yeah. Net benefits to the counterparts.
Wage subsidies is the term.
Okay.
Net
Wage
benefits.
subsidies, also automation.
Also automation. Unco-op has an internal net benefit, states elections.
Okay. The what's the status?
Condo,
Can you kick planks on the subsidies counterplan?
Greece, Connecticut, plans.
Yeah.
Great. Yes.
So you're defending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 conditional advocacies.
No, it's one conditional advocacy to the plans.
Huh?
That's standard procedure, is that like individual plans not in one condo.
Okay, sure. Let's go to the automation disad. The Economist 23 evidence, the link evidence, sorry, the Lardon 18 evidence says minimum wages. Why does this account for the AF 1AC
Yeah,
cross
would
section?
effectively be minimum wage. You give
The
everyone
1AC
guaranteed-
cross section shows that we said it's not minimum.
Nope, you said guaranteed $15 an hour.
That's not minimum.
That's the exact same thing as the league's talking about.
Functionally become a
It would
minimum
functionally
wage.
get you.
Minimum wage is
Yeah,
$8.
This is not
Like,
an argument, go listen to it.
you're just not answering the
I
question.
answered the question. The link assumes that a minimum wage would, like, okay, obviously, private sectors have to pay people over $15 when they're working private sector, they're audited. Because they don't pay people $15,
the-
basically minimum.
The Thornton 22 evidence, does it assume for biotechnology or is this just on the
It
CDC
assumes for
scenario?
biotechnology.
Where does it say talk about
But
biotechnology?
also, it's irrelevant, because we would say that
You
the
just said
reasons-
it talks about biotechnology. Can you tell me what line you're talking about?
Do you want me to list on the real part?
Yeah.
The strength of prosperity is 7 years, given the conflict. That is
No, I'm not
something-
asking you to read the card again. I'm asking like where have you read evidence on biotech?
Yeah, so we think that that question is irrelevant because your evidence indicates.
So there is
No,
no
you're not
evidence read on
looking-
biotech.
You're not looking at this is evidence on biotech. First of all, you have answers to unions, like directly answers, countless.
How does
But you're not looking at the question. The internal link to biotech does not say that China would cause a war because they feel like they have a biotech advantage. It says that in the event of war, they would use it to win the war, but that requires a war to happen in the first place.
sure,
So it directly answers the claim that there will be war. No evidence saying that China was winning.
sure. Let's go to the UCF counterplan. Okay, the net benefit it's internal, right? It's not elections.
These uncooperative federal things.
Okay, let's go to, I guess, the net benefit terror. Can you explain how you saw
The
internal?
evidence indicates that nationalization of law enforcement is bad. Federalism is key to solve terror. We use varying set of approaches. for
Well, I guess like
solving
what's
terror.
federalism in the status quo?
Not the counterplan.
Okay, sure. So, wait,
One
can you
size-
actually explain
currently
again how federalism, like
Currently,
giving
it's a
states power?
one-size-fits-all approach for counterterror. Maya, let's get on this, but the counterplan makes it so that each state has unique solutions to
counterterrorism, which is key assault.
How does the counter plan do that? It just pushes.
That's our solvency advocates, the leash is the program, that's the, says it all possible.
8 minutes starting now.
Stop that. It's been signed. Give it on. Oh, I have to get it ordered. So to be advantage one, honestly, they put the E contour there. I'll probably get a new flow for it if you want to. So advantage one, advantage two, T, the state's counter plan, elections dissat, ACE-BET, the subsidy counter plan, the UCF counter plan, and the automation dissat. I can give that order again if you want. Okay.
Start with the econ term 1, the economy is projected to be low now, well, in 22, the US economy appears to be coming along, at least for now, consumer spending is going to be even more resilient than I currently expected to be, which cause programs on inflation is causing unemployment, weaken the factors supporting economic rewinding as the conflict in the Middle East, greater effects on commodity prices, oil and global financial market, 2 recessions likely now for literally reasons that but looking at the wrong number, most of the country's economy is contracting the verge of permanently which would be job created, solving always received stimulus, getting smaller delinquencies, or riding the estate loss of a climate that's regional banks here, and over the period, new government's not very good signing cost of lending is a liability, small loans of the economy, longest history, a perfect rate of foreign taxing, nothing flashing right the dashboard of economic and use a signal recession, there's a 27-month lag, but you recognize that recession, nothing the presidents have told you it's crazy to happen, and 4, not only can job creating can have no effect on the private sector argument about labor competition, raw material 15, the job creating, a place where becomes a minimum wage of the economy, also observes workers who have effect cannot introduce savings demand for labor, there's no wage competition for job creating when we talk about restricting the size of the private sector, but nothing about the job creating regarding to all illogical business, would not function properly in a job creating would not introduce any benefits, and JG stabilize investments, start some new benefits under the same amount of unemployment is necessary to defend and repeats by raising interest rates, which the survivor, implement these all the warrants by destroying jobs, would not necessarily move the workers on the rate, which and the armies and JG would stabilize ups and downs of inflation. Well, now I'll do advantage proper, they said, so structural harm is wrong, as pre-COVID doesn't assume current labor conditions, stagnant wages or supply chain, and concedes public policy can improve resilience, then they say no emerging tech this actually is wrong, it's not in context of globalized innovation, refer when I see Brexit 14 that specifically warns by emerging tech innovations of an extensive impact when globalized, not just in the US, and they said JG fails but wrong, it doesn't assume that the Fed allows the job market allows the Fed to combat inflation through a counter-cyclical budget, which means that we would create without creating unemployment, including the private sector. 1 and C1 wrong, the plan can't solve infrastructure, the plan does multiple things like global recycling programs that all went drop to, is that they said no food insecurity, that's wrong, the solid 18 evidence concedes that when the food insecurity is combined with poor conditions, i.e. income and jobs, violence escalates, and then 1 C3 no debt, so it's in fact wrong, it never explicitly says that ocean environments is vague about biodiversity, isn't significant when ocean collapse is inevitable, Unions are high now, Colgan is long, it's almost 3 years now, and unions have changed drastically. Prefer when you see the road 23 that says unions are low now, that Biden needs to push them now. And we're doing civil war, Lavin is wrong, it's 2 years old, doesn't take the current economy. When I see Church in 23 specifically says that America's current economy might require a violent revolution due to popular restoration of the cardinal for reference, CDC. They say diseases can't cause extinction wrong. It concedes that the possible at the end of the car. How this only works when the risk of humanity is little more lower than to long-term models. Then the no China impact, it's wrong. It's not prefer when I see liberals argue that says war in South burnout, geographic disparity are likely are all done by COVID and why China will attack now. See. One determination of fiscal region, tax transfer, or about the two vehicles region cover taking taxes very little taxation, benefits maybe quality. 2 would meet the plans visually via data expenditures, we know without tax advising Georgia. What would you mean with the tax entry? 3 plaintiffs in the vacuum and all method for job equality, kicking or rejecting non-all-targeted parts of the plain solves are often prefer into A taxing is only encourages the proliferation of individual small tax B ground deficit spending is rule of C, no limits include functional limit check, process agent counter policies and econ are all better checks, feasibility, competing intervention, instead by constantly moving goalposts, preserve boundaries, ability to debatability. States counterplay. 1 permanent both. Shield of link looks like federal deficit spending being developed as you're preserving. 2 permanent counterplay. 3 states can solve. 6 the A's. 6 can solve disease prevention. They lack the capacity coordination, internal logic, scale up above the government motivation. B, they also don't solve it for innovation. C, design only defense software. 18 only the federal government. That's the capacity to design counters with budget. D, the counterplay can solve the CDC scenario counterplay. The CDC is a federally irregular state means that the federal government cannot use the CCO of our 16 state local government coordination. Federal financials in the middle of all the same elected officials and review coordinating federal financials and federal development, federal agency, LBA, etc. by law. Skip E and F 4 links to that benefit any towards the arguments that the federal government will reach into alternatives. It's also true of the state reserving 5 federal principal limitation of the land of states or dealing the plaintiffs with the government research all progress meaning the counterplay takes more time to select sufficient for that. 6 this state beyond the voting issue education offer lower than 50% average cooperative on single issuing uniformity since the founding US lays 7 condoms of voting issue. The tweet was the last one. Have all exclusive rates to the negative, just go to the least common position. They should get 2 condo education incentivized shotgun. Want to see them make debate about who can drive faster now election system. 1 party loses now, so many things for Democrats, James articles, mornings, party, the president party, who loses former president, 20 party being the only Democrat who ever became president now, the only one who's going to win it, I think will be the majority of 70, under 60 rating, so we have to get 65% of most voters agree with the average, 19 of them, they voted 70% of the random voters in the national incentive, which means the federal government is always more of a heavy idea that identifies as all of the 60% of the song is supported. 3 pathways in terms of the SASU is government breakdown, undermines the structural ability of global alliance like NATO, 4 no lane voters, ignore policy and private, artists and 21 people who falling so with the society going back there. The 6 multiple people are value that all legal differences small accordingly to little level majority of the voters even in the makes knowledge of the entities of election near it overvaluated pre-existing values that are would be Martha Card there 5 year link evidence bad it's not so agree with federal job union state all causes of backlash like a child credit need to dump the link 6 to 7 the defense ever explored over minor our evidence is actually the same for rated 23 Democrats overwhelmingly the GDP by a margin of 4 to 1 the popularity versus maybe popular among the working Democrats and independent Republicans independent or policy judicial law policy and ain't no impact there's the internal link says nothing about NATO and rather just presumes responsible out of every single country was merely false from his previous years. A-spec. 1. No resolution of body justifies making as resolutionary of specified senators or funding. 2. Counter-degradation. You can read normal means evidence to get disoutlings. And 3. Age contemplate still have grounded artificially inflate stupid dissats. 4. Not a voting issue. Worst case, they are encounter contemplate competition, which is the reason for the RBI. Now the subsidies conflict.
First we the
ROAC fails to if you don't want a ROAC, we get disaster for eliminating independent contracting really classifying different matters, federal benefits and contract. This is in the case of a good drugs and flexible arrangement, this is similar to regulation of other covering ABA, increase the cost of voice left in the dust, and on the 1 perm to vote, 2 perm to contemplate. The first plank doesn't solve because workers can still take jobs out of accessibility, doesn't solve. The second plank doesn't solve because all Americans are taking the job right now because of wage, because the accessibility, the CV doesn't change that. Then the fourth plank doesn't solve the CDC scenario. It's about having enough money, but it's not about having, it's about having the workers to do for it. The fifth link, it links in that benefit. There's a literal definition of a federal job. Many people leave the private sector to go to the public sector. You see how it comes. 1 perm to vote, 2 perm to the counterplay, 3 perm to the other issues, perm can solve 8 perm for those voters. We'll strike down policy because 15 states cannot go to the federal law state attempt. No one in face of the supremacy of the special government laws, even the KOB state overkill warming issues, they install the sector of their scenario, has 11 millions of the state government's rates, new law lobbying causes them to apply for economic benefits by lowering environmental standards, no coordinated government interaction, government towards the nature of the work industrial project consequences, water money laws against all, the cause of elimination of the ladies, inventions against the market, Martech card there, see government states are masses against trade, balance with management, and occupied will better, we reckon will take 6 resident, 0 resident bill, buying the company, giving 17 the president, will give the housing armor, that will lead the state to the my resisting the federal government too expensive. All skip 7, 8, we are past nuclear terrorism, now no impact. Like with 19, because you nuclear bombing, they could say that, nuclear bombing since 9/11, the whole world, it's a bit of ruins, and ruins that just about the rest. Like, you know, I'm thinking of the capabilities of running now, finding nuclear, will some of the nuclear running now, I run it, nuclear ways, setting down, proliferation, or doing public accountability, voted ideal level, capital, studying, nuclear capability, Pakistan, just for super measures, and the north of Pakistan, nuclear bombing, I love crisis, so I need to say, you already got capabilities, you know, the voice of it, and we're going to send you the 1 no link to 1 C evidence as minimum weight to trigger this 1 C process means that we are not minimum weight to know not only the AI impacts our actions, noted for my public that favors of avoiding violence. That's what the AI is called. I mean, you can rock the joints to the degree to the more evidence of an AI is the resource and setting is the new result. Point is going over everything that's happening in the news. Ushering about it and speculation that some executive and some of the AI is no one says at least market coverage, automation, solve social labor market shortages, and improve supply chains to prevent offshore emission. 22 having to buying a voice of labor, other efficiency not included in the water down, automation factors over radically forming business generate efficiency, reduce cost of greater water adoption, automation can help offshoring ability to mitigate risk of disruptions of the enforce labor shortages of energy, automation can help the organization of challenges that are in the markets for supply chain disruptions called global war. 2021 is another case where the environments of like international security disrupting, general economic disrupting, quality shortages, driving aggressive behavior, and international instability.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just those last two.
Yeah. I'll say that.
Sorry.
responsive to the econ dissect at the links number?
Because it specifically
We
says,
read links on practice.
Yeah,
That's
well,
not part of it.
That this is not responsive to the economy is good for you.
okay,
The
I mean, it's
Ivory 2-5 card, this card is from 20 days ago, so how is it responsive?
it's really predictive, it's like really good at
So then why is its prediction being wrong?
Huh?
Why is its prediction being wrong? Why haven't you done this?
Right, because it's specifically saying that, well, it has a lot of really good warrants in it, is what I'm trying to say. Like, there are a few really good warrants.
It
I'll
says
pick out
that
one of them.
confidence wanes with every job created,
I'll
the
let you
app
finish.
created. It says, well, I'm asking.
Alright.
It says confidence wanes with every job created, the app creates jobs, when it's disproven many times.
Right, because it specifically says that soft landings always receive recessions. That's key. It doesn't matter if you win a link. The soft landings always come after recessions. So if the app comes first,
Okay, it
the
says
app's
the
impact
inverted yield
after.
curve. What is the inverted yield curve?
The inverted yield curve is this like.
What is an inverted yield curve?
Oh
It's a
yeah,
measure.
it's like it's the measure of like
Okay, so
investor.
it's
Wait, no,
just
sorry.
inflation.
Sorry, no,
Versus
it's a measure of an investor's return. So like over long-term bonds and like.
Okay, the
yeah.
middle lane full point is countercyclical pleasure, you see more long term. How is this responsive to recession? The app second one is cross happens the next recession triggers it.
I think what the 186 Chernavas 18 evidence specifically says is that the way that the app uses a counter-cyclical budget, it avoids any link to inflation, whether it's caused by the private sector, because we can borrow and return money as
Where
the economy.
evidence that unemployment is good for the economy. You've read evidence that the app causes unemployment. Where have you read that something that solves the economy?
That's specifically, well, we read that, we sent that card out, that was one of them, and also the SPA 17, that says making stabilized.
The automation dissect, the supply chain disruptions cause global war. How would why haven't, okay, it cites something that's already solving structural labor shortages. What's the internal link between structural labor shortages and supply chain disruptions?
Well, I mean, are you talking about like from the link? Like,
You said the app.
wait, I'm confused by the part.
The automations. It
Yeah,
says
I understand that.
Structural automation solves structural labor market shortages, but then you have supply chain disruptions.
Oh
That's
yeah, it specifically talks. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It specifically talks about like spill up in the economy with like wages and that like behavior. It would instantly, yeah.
strategies to address unemployment and worker leverage. Plank 1, subsidize private companies creating new jobs and raising wages. Plank 2, kicking the Plank 3, researching worker bargaining power by passing the proactive. Plank 4, solves that federal impacts by increasing funding the federal agency. Plank 5, solves the CDC scenario by no more by increasing federal hiring to staff agency. That solves staffing shortage in the places like the CDC. Those who project career larger, more productive, and better off than the labor force. So that's Smith. That we should instead no deficit assumes all the places in tandem. No, that Smith does. So if we lose on permanent theory, logical extension of condo, but also sufficiency frame or unquantifiable deficits are outweighed by the net benefit. The proactive fails. It solves unions with 22. Bill with that would both serve the member of the work laws of their private union. Often seems to operate the nationwide right union act within the coalition that make way for a robust organizing it in their evidence to try the California will, which is not a proactive by conservative dictator just who was just ranting because nobody wants it. Isn't viable in the money or assume the company solves perm both frame into office and 15 the company solves the entire case. So air they got any risk in the inclusion of lands worse for the economy, the firm links and that benefit first competition. John Green will of course governments being people the government has no problem constraints and converters and money. Government will always win that's the second benefits of one marginal wage improvements like 1821 and GDP will provide benefits and health insurance whatever as an example low wage practice workers only being able to work with the higher rating of work available workers economic part generals other business whatever all the low wage of practicing workers workers that do enroll in state put firm to the account plan is severance that's better for app condo first actually the account plan doesn't guarantee a job second functionally the account plan subsidized but does not guarantee jobs so requires an willingness of private companies to hire they said it's not accessible to both the first plan solve accessibility by subsidizing private sector job creation which means that people can go there the direct hiring deficits are wrong kind of solves ours workers and increase the funding of the federal agency that solves two transfers regularly costing staffing deficits to build second impact global increases funds with elaborate inflation and upgrades the federal agencies and solves the impact global because I'm going about funding not as staffing will be the card but the links in that benefit is wrong don't guarantee a job it's about expanding the direct hiring that exists now and you don't guarantee that everyone gets a job if they want to, which means it doesn't link to this econ. Economic shock cells nuclear war policy opposite says the next recession will trigger denisal state stagnation, no break in direction comes existential transition was an adversarial aggression before job guarantee. Give boost aggregate demand enough to counter adverse tag economic causes. Risk taking which trades for dangerous technology, taking food, and you can address the economy community to food exports globally causing the decline of the isolation. So third is democracy, decline returns democracy Potter 21 growth and make snow and increases. Recommended the demographic of the economy should build distrust democracy the Russian drive down national and fascist stagnation of democracy are strongly linked. Fourth is Alexander 9. This is done in the economy as a public health as a progressive environmental condition. Conducted by insects or animals. Economies both getting busters first manufacturing orders in development and they job increase strong growth prices were price for this license 2020 that's the market that should force us it indicates strong growth to 22 motion certain fuel items express you got on going like pressure that manufacturing and business saying there's order to go factory up the rest of the for manufacturing services nice going to the office and the direction becomes getting to the extent and utilizing when you go that you work we got down there session to adapt it indicators and indicators what yourself we get over as since when I go over for this goes over the session and somebody just after they're up there to release out for the best economic usually we got like the other 23rd station as you know indicators positive their first part is still incredibly bad. Concludes that there's no recession now, and also said that manufacturing and supply aside are increasing, which solves our terminal that certainly highlighted, but also the second card is old and shut down dumps in the terminal, but also includes that GDP is high, which is one of our warrants still linked today. They put in the short card they first gathered. When workers have been capacity from the public works, they advocates have been higher wages about guarantee forcing layoffs, improving jobs as 1/3, reverse incentives third, 13 and 53 of our regional with the public sector with the sun that the motion, what jobs are showing and working in the public sector doesn't order and so that the rest of the money to do that. Also, public sector understaffed of the maintenance and deliver unemployment. They said countercyclical will stabilize. 2AC3 is countercyclical stabilizer, but these countercyclical goes first down by the defendant. It doesn't specify low wages, so it should be questioned normal needs add on after everything else encourages siblings and feels negative. But I want to be out there for everybody. The least harmful policy after the 1 to 6 second double line, there's not going to keep it scraps, and cancel accurate demand or 1.0 or the 5 7 lower wages when you do. One more flexibility and job security, usually 20, 30 workers. And one amount, so much what I was only kind of doing for real. More than change that job as you get when you feel secure, I give them down, so job security, then more money workers. Make career is 4 points to net, and you come in hanging 20 low. On your way that way, you become retail at 1 when you not and figuring out that probably you know, talking our job in over using your service. One point on the calls out, you got 31% in the industries. Industrial is actually the way how to watch it with the proper labor from that less how many reducing productivity. The last part is just an inflation terminal that's not this is a crowd, this is a non-inflation disadvantage. It also doesn't say a link, it doesn't make a link to an argument, it just says no link. Okay, on to new business. No return to emerging technologies or cause that the state tax argument, winning the states become permanent taker and regulations emerging cases in the international states and road actors won't listen to you guys, let alone the states as in the South tech development. Think about it, Delaware, China, and Russia, the topic. Not developing advantageous tech is ridiculous, but also literacy and answer to the impact of prudence because they say it's about globalized innovation, they can solve other countries better. Calling for full scale federalism and not the money together, 22 out of them. Others that they get the law there is ever. The server agreement that's ever enforcement. Seems probably the US has this is a critical world, no impact on emerging countries at all. Obama's the graduate or overhyped. Save our checking and sustainability. That's success rabbits. Workers. No food wars that the vaccine or best research and basically reducing words costly, no correlation. Even political disruption rise, good hours of joint afraid that's the land. The 4 conditions aren't all met right now, but also process other factors that control food wars. If you are how are you fighting this land more deeply economically, and the conservation of the others, I'm using the name of how many people that say odds under the stress, and there does impact they don't probably see not input presenting gas on the best work and individually overfish on the food environment or ethics and this is not the risk once you break one zero as long as the right rate that you use it one can do it and create operates out from the administration but the security as a starting point no civil war one in a 1,000 shots to become government and aside therefore the peaceful resolution report right now is having one and the FBI checks that as well and prefer because your data is flawed and can't predict insurgency or be highlighted nowhere it says that reform requires a violent revolution, not never a revolution happen now. No civil war in the U.S. actually no diseases and how pandemics are existential because legal pandemics are globally transmissible wars as a condition with danger to all ages and genetic pools of deadly diseases. Easier this can indicate which answer for that argument even a super pandemic that killed 90% of the population can pick up your 10% that's voter applies to China's up. They can see the China government said no internal link to the China virus. They saw independent symptoms and channels de-escalate and history proves this agreement still caused water war. Technological impossibility of pandemic started coming even Asians are the right to the loss of the watch on the effect of underestimate challenges in development.
How is it solving these scenarios? Like, how is giving money solve for unemployment? The Article 20 of it specifically says that money is not the issue and that employment is what we need to attack. It's the dysfunction of the CDC.
That's why you get
Wait, what's the other thing?
It doesn't say for the CDC, doesn't it say for all federal programs? How does that not work?
Okay, but if it's for all programs,
like how you explain how hiring is so specific. This is hiring for a business now. You're not guaranteed that every employee person on the street is this. So we can probably have to qualify.
alright, okay, the PROACT stuff, I guess why isn't this true to like the econ exam? Like why? But the concept when the US specifically talks about like how it would like make provisions and create robust organization, why wouldn't the state fund it? Like, why isn't this true? Well, okay, I was just saying like
I'm not costing employees in class.
the first point, you take this in, right? The first point, why does this conflict with the conflict set?
The subset by the sector class. You give them money so that they can stay there.
Alright, okay, that's fine. On the e-conflict side, the productive job plan, this midnight team doesn't like, or why does this midnight, how does this midnight team like talk about specifically that our specific job? Okay. Which part did you read on this? I thought you did. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. The proven evidence and stagnation. Why does it? Yeah. Why does this impact now? Why does it like? No, there was something. Oh, okay, fine. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm sitting out there with the order, you know what takes first, right? The order is the state's counterplan, on co-op, on nations. I see double no. States on co-op on and then I guess these have states and co-op. Aspects, not a reverse voting issue, here we go on this. States not. Content we did when they close talk is massively close to the words of topic after the next round, to decide and we have to go to the or not, try to after one watch and see how many days of that's so like yourself to use to very you can always find a more really debatable information facing the just making counterpoint to compilation order. Three innovation called by stress goes to our story and recent words are some other words force research and the actual problem and the answer is utility having one of the values so it's the liability to the other because that's the island for case of death. Solve research and enroll visitors that's our introduce the order for the that's also common source for the last one in the second one see the generics and the result which returns condo links to all two condo links to all of our offerings which solves none there is no reason why three condos one worse which used in two and one condos bad one was all wrong to me impossible to bring in the arguments to not one to state the city of that is predict arguments on co-op conceive from state's comp plan conceive no impact conceive that voters ignore partisanship on states lacks analysis one no words that was AGI takeover guarantees human extinction on nation grids. AGI control critical section of economy when the world sector AGI no longer serves even community that's not or use a version mass innovation and unstoppable as tell that or profit photo size systems in an egg on 18 by explore mechanism about exit with no some believe you don't use on massive on the or you both sides are not the design of all the last economic reputation of our area, but the only one they get is it's like existential risk mongering, and obviously the one they see is two. It says nuclear war, so like extra risk calls. Now, we have some
magnitude on each area, so you're still working. Dystopia worsening station was when you lose the control of it. You're able to distribute the negative values and something important you're telling you. You don't do ground floor, you control it. Also, tournaments and on everything else. Desire to get your own thing. Disasters. Yeah, only one zone. Excellent capacity. It turns all of their ordinance terms and quality. These results in like people,
automation taking jobs turns the food subsidies out of the environment. Turns the econ scenario because automation destroys jobs and destroys work consumers.
Unhinged AI unlocks nuclear escalation, input suffering was 20x, was removed the email scenarios and the weak points. They had accident and 9,000 value possible to break it. Taylor system escalating power with a draw, but I'm trying to put more power, 7 humans, UW denial of humanity, impact. Petrucci says supply chains are failing now where there's no internal link, which I inserted the card for reference. The reason that's bad is because if those states are impact dead, which means that their impact should have already occurred, which means low risk. And when Martin agrees and says their offense is low probability, I'll read this one, see March 21. They should try to maintain access to Martin resource by peaceful use of stockpile, New York, Mexico, Martin Mason, use all the facilities. The terminal impact is interdependence. There's no interdependence in background. 1913 was interconnected, you're going to war, interdependence. Probably can do something. All the rules trade is all the other examples for carrying on creates more than one the other, trade more than hostile, useful, different, consider value, aggressive, and I factor in one or one for the second, was no interface when no power, and military issues dominate trades and all of those. Trade is relevant for 1 minute, 15 hours, more than let's work for everything coming out of the but provides all little materials to work for the position. For the fact that using it for control for the market, one side of the organization suggest the rest of the trade deals is no problem. Here's to have influence on war, trades, kind of factor in market. Uniqueness, I think they're sure. Automation implemented in slow when inertia corporation regularly automating the workplace investment or rights to solve that team minus something to invest in one of years automation. Implemented as a conflict option to investment to war. Much technology utilized by NASA and all available ministry, but adoption is slow in Europe and the other reason for the reason Europe and so becomes automation as a general bureau of the politics or working for wildlife and right now it really seems that the whole thing is primarily find the probability of automation of the energy that can be never seen like okay to reduce for millennium. Our good side is most people with technology and really don't have an interest in fact that can be sometimes the words and so we don't really App effectively creates an MBA every company would have for his workers' wages $15 an hour. They would get work for guaranteed more money. Kind of on the job that they have to really contest it. Independently, perception still occurs. Okay. Plan goes mass innovation is one of the cost minimum wage relative acceleration of finance and the companies involved coming down to ideas and plan. Cost for plan terms voice meaning that automate that sort of plan. First private sector see those big ways and administrating as the cost of employees creating a large degree of private sector with everything else. Or in ways of private sector, no additional cost of the private sector with also some programs working on the system of the world and our team on the headway. Federal funding this task force automation as so on always requires the market was no engineering or low those are that's not manufacturing much expert automation in the sector or now in Tina and particularly when there's not that's on another person manufacturing rates and over those recycling is very on the one that goes 90% of the I'm reaching out to avoid finding fall back up to workers only works against the employees won't die just tell their employees
Can you tell me what's going on?
Yes. So I read all the parts. I read the unhinged AI complex quiz. I read all the parts. Set detector or I read the
What did you not read on the impact term?
on impact term, I only did the detector control and I use the force one part probability and all this.
Since you did it,
oh, not set up the card.
so what?
Not set up the
Startup resilience, I'm not going for it. Concede that it's a misunderstanding, but I'll concede there's no impact in emerging tech takes out any chance of the AI dissat because literally all their impacts are based on emerging tech, makes the AI dissat a non-starter for the 2 and R because the card specifically that they've read about talks about that no impact to AI, so does the 1AC evidence, which means that you're definitely not going to vote for the AI dissat now, but I'll go on to the food wars, the industrial ag is unsustainable due to soil degradation, oil acidification, and high emission, all guarantee that existential climate extinction and inability of biosphere for the plains also increase global recycling programs, sustainable farming, and long-term sustainability efforts that stabilize food production. And they say no impact to food insecurity, job the uniqueness debate that when food insecurity is combined with other poor conditions, income and jobs, and violence escalates. That's what our evidence talks about. Now they say that if you're hungry, how do you fight? No, they identify tribulation as the main problem and says that there's more deficit measures when you are hungry. Now that was the only defense there. Unions, I'm not going for it. Concede there's no impact to populism, and they said that takes out their on the resilience. They said takes out their next 2 scenarios. I'll concede it. Talks about totalitarianism. I'll concede it. No impact to civil war. CDC. Pandemics are coming now with a high risk, and the CDC shutting jobs as well, but only job guarantee can involve and the CDC managed job guarantee that's effective national response that can prevent pandemics from causing extinction and mentally CDC savage sources of I'm not going for the biotech impact. All their stuff on the subsidies plan is specific to biotech. I'm not going for it. They say that no disease impact pandemics and existential doesn't assume for the syndemic virus that's winter's virus that's greater 20 cities coming now. They say no China war. I'm not going for China war. The automation dissat. They say magnitude, all it talks about it's being dystopian. That's no reason why you vote on automation. And they say S-race, it doesn't say that AI alone triggers S-race. It talks about space calling, huge space computers. The link evidence definitely doesn't say that it triggers that. No, they say probability doesn't assume a syndemic winter for CDC. Now they say the impact is mute. There's no warrant in the card about how AI would do it. And also the internal link explanation is incoherent. They say trade is irrelevant. Says at most times doesn't assume a full collapse of trade, which our cards do. Now, there was literally no link extended. I want you to flow it. I want to see your flow because they literally just didn't say any link. They talked about like minimum wage and wage scenarios, but there was no reason for why. The federal jobs guarantee would cause AI automation. The links are specific on a supercomputer and things like that, but there's no reason AJG would do that. Now extend the Heaven 23 evidence that those jobs, it talks about how AI impacts are hype, which means that there's definitely no impact to the dissat. Now they also the Virtue 22 evidence. Actually, I want to extend it to subsidies. First, they can't solve for CDC because they definitely link to the net benefit. Don't make them kick in. They can't kick it now because we're going for a CDC now. They says, quote, increase its direct hiring to federal agencies to fully staffed executive agencies, end quote. That literally doesn't only include the CDC, that includes numerous agencies outside the CDC, which means that even if it's not guaranteeing a job to everybody, it almost is because it makes every executive agency fully staffed, which means it definitely links to the econ because the econ's link is about private sector. By a lot of people leave the private sector and go back. Now it can't solve ag because there's literally not an ag plank. They forgot to put it or something, but and I'm not going for that.
Can't solve that.
It can't solve that. I'll start on the impact after the entirety of the dissat pandemics and food insecurity come first on the unique question because they have job creator 23 that says that syndemic viruses are coming now. That's specific to the winter surge, which means that we're definitely winning on the impact. Now it comes first on probability because the creator 23 evidence says that the risk of these diseases is very high. Inflation has never caused, a private sector has never caused extinction before, and the impact analysis is wrong. I'll go through it here. First, they say tech, no explanation of what dangerous tech. Two, they say food, no recession, no reason why the economy is key to food. Nutrient pollution is that they say turns democracy doesn't change popularization, which is the key impact of civil war, which is inequality. They say turns diseases, talks about animals and insects. That doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything on diseases. The uniqueness question. Hard living is never the latest economic indicators prove. Monroe 2214. So U.S. economy seems unlikely to higher greater than 50% chance that the U.S. will lead hard landing or no landing. All market, all now extended to easy agri evidence that is the most recent in this round. It says that A, soft landing happens now after recession, which is after the app. Now B's, commitments are getting smaller than C, inverted yields now that warrant is gone job. Why investors will not continue funding, extend the ball evidence and flows out. 2003 warrants for job spending. I'll go to the link. New car job guarantee allows the Fed to combat inflation without and cooling the private sector. But like all 18, the Fed has a dual mandate that the federal government plays a role in full employment, but government monetary policy on employment on the list monetary policy to reduce private sector investment extend one AC one.
economic decline is much faster than the after winter surge alone won't cause extinction, but you know the decline does because we can see the terminal impact. No one see Oppenheimer evidence. The transition wars and nationalism aggression are inevitable in the world of the and also populism only maintaining the status quo can solve it. They also the turn case answers were not sufficient we're not sufficient. Turns food because there's no exports without a strong economy. We'll turn inwards and isolate ourselves. That's what the Oppenheimer says will happen. Oppenheimer evidence says will happen. But also, it turns diseases because our public healthcare system will be lacking and will be defunded, which means that diseases are much more likely. The uniqueness today as such washes so many drop warrants about what they are. Then you cannot justify voting negative. Fucks anything. Voting out. The remorse when they are conceded that the economy is strong first, manufacturing massive orders off, which indicates the economy is going, the amount of money in the economy, investment in consumer spending now goes. Conceded by the when they are also was in the highlight of the 2AC piece of evidence saying which they said is the most recent, so you should prefer it. It's a neg card. It says that no recession will occur now. Fox's computer turned off, but also our evidence says that GDP and that the price index is up. It says that inflation is cooling. The Fed limits rates and the CPI shows that the Fed has got interest rates to their target. The 2AC card for uniqueness once again is our argument. It says increased consumer spending and also growth in numerous sectors, which increases the supply side of the economy, which is solves for overall decline. The yield curve argument. They said it was dropped, but it wasn't a real argument. And as of the 2AC, it was just embedded in one of their cards. But when I say now, the yield curve proves that the Fed is limiting inflation. It doesn't always indicate a recession. Sometimes it gets inverted. But also they don't have a warrant for why to prefer this. So prefer our factors, which are actually material things that you know are happening. Links control the direction of uniqueness. The economy changes all the time, but you know that the app completely derails it and collapses it. The Crowdo link is massive. 70+ million people immediately leave the private sector because they make less than $15. That's a board evidence prefer its specificity. No after gets that level, but also they need for job security and more flexible hours. That's a short evidence. Both were conceded by the when they are. The inflation stuff is irrelevant. They don't have an internal link card for this, but it's also an internal link for inflation to broader economic collapse, but also it's not offense because they haven't read a card that says that job guarantee will stabilize all inflation or decrease inflation. They haven't read anything it's called for. Subsidies counterpoint solves any risk of the workers' advantage. Just if we lose on links and that benefit, they drop. Then it's the logical extension. Combat banks and combat bad. The counterpoint with a fund of rag hiring for the CDC, which does not link to net benefit because it is not guaranteed that everyone gets a job. If it's not hire the unemployed, they would have to go through a process to be hired, and they would have to be qualified enough to get the job. And it doesn't. They definitely wouldn't pay as much as $15 an hour. That's why the CDC can't get people on board now. But also, the ag plank was to subsidize workers plank. That normal means is that doing agricultural jobs versus job, which means that it solves for it. Evaluated for sufficiency rating, the net benefit is huge. Workers' advantage, no food wars. I'll probably best to get the proxy complex, but no great powers will join the fray. Russia, China, and the U.S. don't want to get involved in wars, so they'll stay out. But that does not apply to our impact because the U.S. is the one waging wars in other countries, and they jump on a perceived U.S. decline. But also there's the four factors thing is incoherent because they haven't proven that the other four factors are happening right now. And also, our evidence assumes these and says that there's still no correlation between food and conflict. That's just the land evidence. But also, war is costly, and powers would not go to war anyway. But also, they stay internal. They would not go to other countries. It's absurd to assume that the U.S. would start nuking Russia or China if people in the U.S. were hungry. But also, that food is needed for the army, which means that conflict wouldn't be able to be sustained for long enough to get to existential. No disease impact as diseases get more deadly, they will not spread as much, which means that the impact won't get to overall extinction, even if it killed 90% of the population, and it still wouldn't cause extinction. That's the further evidence, but also it's technologically impossible to create super pathogens. No, it's circumvent this, and the further evidence doesn't. The technology, this doesn't exist yet, and it can't be scaled up. Automation, we see no impact. They didn't leave the links in the trace stuff. They're going to turn on to it.
top levels that the counterplay cannot solve for the agriculture scenario or the CDC scenario, which means a high risk of the ag scenario versus a mitigated risk of the econ descent means you can very comfortably vote affirmative. I'll start with the agriculture scenario. Industrial ag is unsustainable soil degradation, oceanification, a high emissions, all guarantee existential climate extinction, and inability of the biosphere. For the plan solves it creates global recycling programs, sustainable farming, and long-term sustainability efforts that stabilize food production, which otherwise creates regional and international instability and causes war. Now they said that it can't go to war if the military is weak. No, it's about desperate measures. They dropped the warning that if the military is weak, they have to restructure in some way. The only way to do that is through war. And they dropped the uniqueness that when food insecurity is combined with void income in conditions, i.e. income and jobs, violently escalate. Doesn't matter about all their empirical conditions that they've said in this round because they've multiple times dropped our their evidence. Now they've also dropped the Grade 22 evidence. I'm not the food insecurity and Mac was responded to, but not climate extinction about warming and that the collapses of ocean and outweighs climate change. That's my crime to forget about extinction. The Grade 22 says that they were far worrisome about climate change due to nutrient pollution and that carries large volumes of economy and the number of dead zones was been doubled. Now they dropped the dead zone. They read no dead zones in fact, but they didn't extend it. That's key. Now the CDC scenario. Pandemics are coming now with high risk from the CDC shedding jobs as well, but only a job guarantee can solve through a CDC managed jobs program that's even an effective natural response to prevent pandemics from causing issues independently. CDCs have been causing biotech innovation and climate allows the Chinese sector to overtake American farm extinction. Now they only have one thing, which is that the tech solves now that there's no impact of diseases, but it's wrong. They draw the indict and the voter concedes it's possible at the end of the card. It literally sees how the argument only works when the risk of humanity is similar or lower than long-term non-goals and the
They
technology
said four
stuff is
factors,
really
never said what four
Yeah,
factors.
yeah, that's fine. See, they kind of like.
It links them in that benefit. They just said it doesn't pay as much, but it's a federal job, which means that they can't change it. They said they didn't hire everyone. That's still mass hiring across every single federal agency. Look at the counterplan tax, which obviously takes away from the private sector. Means it definitely links. Now, the CDC blank is incredibly problematic. First is that it doesn't solve it. It's not about having enough money, but it's about having the workers to do so. Now, the implication has gone dropped, and it definitely doesn't solve the agriculture scenario. They said it would be subsidized by workers, but there's absolutely no way that it solves warming. He spent 4 seconds on this link and moved on. We both have no idea how the link solves the ag scenario and a drop climate impact. Now remember that it doesn't pay as much as a wait, what?
There's a link to it.
Oh, yeah, I already meant that.
No, just explain it.
Okay, they just said that it doesn't pay as much as a federal job, which means that they can change. That.
It's still they're
It's
still hiring.
Yeah, they're still
That's the
hiring.
link to the econ.
Exactly. They're just talking about hiring jobs. So is
For all federal agencies.
for all federal agencies. Look at the content. And it cannot solve the accident. There's no way that just hiring a bunch of jobs solves the climate change and food insecurity. Like, generally just think about that. There's no way that they key on the global recycling program. Econ is done. Not enough on Turn's case. There's literally zero impact algorithm to an R, which means that any risk of food insecurity, climate change, and disease turn the that means that the app comes first. They've literally dropped time frame on every single impact. The first is that versus that diseases come before economy and it will always come first because we're headed for a syndemic winter now. The Greater 23 evidence is amazing. It specifically says why a syndemic winter is on the way now. They have not read a single time frame card. And I'll do the food insecurity impact analysis here. Food insecurity comes first. So Turner 18 says the food tensions are on the rise now, and the Greater 22 evidence says that when food tensions are high, food wars immediately trigger war, which is problematic for the app. Now, there's not a single card read by the affirmative nor negative that says that the econ has impact triggers soon. Now, they've also dropped a uniqueness claim that says that's the UGA ivory evidence that empirically says that soft landings always happen after recessions, which means that the ass impact will have to come first in your ballot. And they said that there's no exports when we isolate ourselves, but there was no reason why the food sector would be impacted by econ because trade would obviously still be able to happen. And they said it turns on based on disease, but it's new. Even if the money isn't an issue, it's employment, which the app solves. Actually, yeah. Drop the new card that I read in the 1AR, that a job guarantee allows the Fed to combat inflation without creating unemployment and cooling the private sector. This is a link turn. The ball at all, 18 evidence is great. Specifically talks about the dual role in the full employment that a job guarantee has the Federal Reserve, that the Federal Reserve cannot conduct monetary policy without unemployment, but the federal job guarantee would solve. It creates monetary policy to reduce private investment to cool the economy, which solves the minimum wage link. Now that means that, and also they've drawn to turn 18 evidence that says that the link is solved by counter-cyclical budget. That means that we would borrow and return money into the economy, which means even if you do think coming out of the 2R that we somehow increase wages and that's problematic, we still borrow and return money into the economy, which means the
the absolute result.
Rate of 23 diseases.
Yeah.